I was given 5 minutes to clear my desk before my husband's father, the CEO, dismissed me in front of the entire leadership team. Instead of breaking, I smiled and said, "Thank you." One by one, 22 colleagues quietly stood and followed me out. Nia sneered until the legal director turned pale and whispered, "Get the lawyer, now." 4 minutes and 30 seconds left, Nicholas announced to the room, his Rolex glinting as he tapped its face. I continued packing my desk drawer, pulling out 6 years' worth of work. Project files, team photos, the backup drive containing every system architecture I'd built for Vertex Solutions. The 12 executives watched in silence as I placed each item deliberately into my cardboard box. Nia Blackwood leaned back in her chair, examining her manicured nails with practiced boredom. She thought she'd won. For minutes, Nicholas called out again, his voice sharp with authority. That's when Logan Mitchell stood up from his desk outside the conference room's glass walls, laptop bag already in hand. But I should explain how we got here. How 3 weeks of calculated betrayal led to this moment where my father-in-law counted down my professional execution like a microwave timer. Before we continue, I want to thank you for being here. If you believe that dedication and hard work should be valued over office politics, please consider subscribing. It helps more people discover these important stories. Now let's see what Nicholas had planned. It started at Sunday dinner at the Harrington estate, where we gathered like actors in a play nobody wanted to perform anymore. I'd arrived with Taylor and my homemade apple pie, the one with the lattice crust that took 2 hours to perfect. Eleanor always requested it but never mentioned who made it, as if pies materialized from thin air or perhaps the help. Another record quarter for Vertex Solutions, Nicholas had proclaimed, standing at the head of the mahogany dining table that could seat 20 but usually held just the 4 of us, drowning in its own excess. He raised his crystal tumbler, the whiskey inside catching the light from Eleanor's precious Viennese chandelier. "We're dominating the market because I know how to recognize talent and put it where it belongs." His hand landed on Taylor's shoulder with the weight of expectation and inheritance. My husband glowed under the attention, though his contribution to the company consisted mainly of having the right last name and showing up to meetings he didn't understand. Nobody mentioned the Henderson account I'd saved 2 nights before. Or the Morrison Industries contract I'd salvaged by working through 3 consecutive weekends. Or the fact that while Nicholas was at his monthly country club whiskey tasting, detecting notes of oak and self-importance, I was rebuilding our entire server infrastructure after a critical failure. "You look tired, dear," Eleanor had murmured, her fingers, decorated with enough diamonds to fund my entire department's salary, briefly grazing my shoulder. "Perhaps you should consider better work-life balance. Appearance matters, especially for women in leadership." I'd swallowed my response along with my overcooked salmon. The truth was I looked tired because I'd been awake for 36 hours straight, but admitting that would only prove their unspoken point, that I couldn't handle the pressure, that I was, as Nia would later write, overwhelmed. The morning routine with Taylor had become a study in marital disconnect. Each day started the same. Him fumbling with the expensive espresso machine his parents gifted us, creating coffee that tasted like burnt disappointment while scrolling through sports news on his phone. "Big week ahead?" he'd asked that particular Tuesday, 2 weeks before everything imploded. "I should hear about the promotion today." I watched his reflection tense in the microwave door. "Right. The promotion." He took a sip of his failed latte. "Dad mentioned Nia's been really impressive lately. She's been staying late, taking on extra projects." My fingers stilled on my laptop keyboard. Nia Blackwood, who arrived at 9:30 sharp and left at 5 o'clock on the dot. Nia, whom I'd been training for 3 months at Nicholas's specific request. "She just needs mentoring," he'd said. "Someone to show her how we do things here." So I'd opened my playbook, shared my strategies, explained our client relationships with the patience of a kindergarten teacher. She'd taken notes in her designer portfolio, asking questions that felt increasingly invasive. "How do you handle system failures? What's your backup protocol? Who has administrative access?" I thought she was eager. Turned out she was building a case. The server migration crisis should have been my moment of vindication. 7 days before Nicholas would slam his palm on that conference table, our entire data infrastructure needed emergency migration. 40 terabytes, 8-hour window, 0 margin for error. Everything went wrong at once. Corrupted files, failed backups, A power surge that shouldn't have been possible. By 10 p.m. I'd activated my emergency protocol, calling in my entire team. Logan arrived first, still wearing the program from his daughter Emma's dance recital pinned to his shirt. "She understood," he'd said quietly, though I caught him checking videos his wife sent from the auditorium. Priya came next, apology heavy in her voice as she called her husband. "I know it's our anniversary dinner. I'll make it up to you." She'd ended the call and dove into code like she was defusing a nuclear weapon. Marcus Thompson, Sarah Kim, the Morrison twins who communicated in what seemed like telepathic programming language, they all came without question. The conference room became our bunker, littered with laptops, energy drinks, and eventually Chinese takeout that went cold before we could eat it. "We're like some weird, dysfunctional family," Marcus had joked at 2 a.m., attempting to eat lo mein with one hand while typing with the other. "Yeah, but at least we chose each other," Sarah had replied, and something about those words felt prophetic now. We'd saved everything. Every file, every client, every contract. Nicholas would never know we'd been 3 keystrokes from losing millions in data and trust. That's what I did. I solved catastrophes so quietly that nobody knew they'd happened. Then came the email. The misdirected message that revealed everything. I'd been reviewing the Henderson account files at 11:47 p.m., preparing my promotion presentation when it appeared. From Nia Blackwood. To me. Except it wasn't meant for me. "Nicholas, as discussed, I've successfully salvaged the Henderson situation. The client was thoroughly impressed with my crisis management. I believe it's time to discuss restructuring. She seems overwhelmed, arrives looking exhausted most mornings. Perhaps fresh leadership would benefit the department." My laptop screen blurred as I read it twice, then 3 times. The Henderson situation. The one I'd personally managed while Nia was posting Instagram stories from a wine tasting. The rescue I'd orchestrated while she slept. I forwarded it to my personal email without thinking, some primitive instinct for self-preservation kicking in. Then I sat in my home office, still wearing the coffee-stained blouse I'd put on 18 hours earlier, understanding finally that dedication looked like weakness to those who'd never truly worked. 3 minutes, Nicholas announced now, his voice cutting through my memory. The executives remained frozen, but through the glass I saw Priya standing up, then Marcus, then Sarah. One by one my team, my chosen family, began to rise. 2 minutes, Nicholas called out, but his voice seemed to come from underwater. Through the conference room's glass walls, I could see the entire 15th floor frozen in a tableau of disbelief. Sarah Kim had her phone halfway to her ear. The Morrison twins stood at their adjoining desks, identical expressions of shock on their faces. I reached for the framed photo from our last team celebration, the one where we'd worked 72 hours straight to launch the Patterson project. My fingers brushed against something else. A USB drive, taped underneath my desk drawer. The one where I'd backed up every email, every document, every piece of evidence that might matter someday. Apparently someday was today. The morning had started wrong from the moment I'd badged into the building at 6:45 a.m. The security guard, usually chatty, had avoided my eyes. The elevator seemed too quiet. The 15th floor felt like it was holding its breath. When I'd reached the conference room to set up my presentation, the one about our department's 340% efficiency increase, Nia was already there. In my seat. The one I'd claimed 3 years ago because it faced away from the glaring morning sun. Her laptop was open to spreadsheets I recognized immediately. My department's confidential budget projections, the ones on a secured server she shouldn't have been able to access. "Oh, good morning," she'd said, that saccharine sweetness coating her words like artificial sweetener. "Nicholas asked me to review these before the meeting. You don't mind, do you?" The question wasn't really a question. We both knew it. I'd stood there, laptop bag heavy on my shoulder, watching her scroll through salary allocations, project budgets, vendor contracts. 6 years of carefully built financial architecture. "How did you get access to those files?" She'd looked up then, and for just a second the mask slipped. Pure satisfaction flickered across her features before the innocent expression returned. "Nicholas gave me temporary admin privileges. To help with the transition." Transition. The word hung there between us like a diagnosis. The room had filled gradually but wrong. David Park from finance arrived first, clutching his tablet like a shield, not meeting my eyes when I said good morning. Then came Margaret Lawson, our legal director, who normally radiated composure but today kept checking her phone, gripping her legal pad with white knuckles. Even the coffee was wrong. Usually, someone would have started the expensive machine by now, the one that ground beans fresh for each cup. Today there was only silence and the smell of fierce sweat barely masked by expensive cologne. I'd started my presentation anyway. Clicked through slides showing our achievements, our metrics, our wins. My voice stayed steady even as I felt the room's energy shifting, darkening, preparing for something I couldn't quite name. As you can see, we've exceeded every target by. The door hadn't just opened. It had exploded inward, the handle cracking against the wall hard enough to leave a mark. Nicholas stood there, his face that particular shade of red that appeared when his blood pressure medication wasn't quite enough. His Italian suit, usually perfect, looked disheveled. His tie was crooked. He crossed the room in 3 strides, his palm hitting the table with enough force to make everyone's coffee jump. Margaret's actually spilled, brown liquid pooling across her legal pad, but she didn't move to clean it. You have 5 minutes to clear your desk. The words didn't make sense at first. They existed in the air but my brain refused to process them. I stood there, presentation clicker still in my hand, slide 17 still glowing on the screen behind me. A graph showing the money I'd saved this company. That's when I understood the choreography of this morning. Why Nia had my files. Why executives avoided eye contact. Why Margaret looked ready to cry or run or both. This wasn't spontaneous. This was planned. Orchestrated. I had been marked for execution and everyone except me had known it was coming. Nia leaned back in my chair, and I saw it then. The slight upturn of her lips, the relaxation in her shoulders, the way she examined her manicure with the satisfaction of someone admiring their own handiwork. She'd won something and we both knew it. But here's what 20 years in tech had taught me. The moment when you think you've won is usually when you're most vulnerable. David Park's fingers were moving across his calculator with the frantic energy of someone watching money evaporate. I knew that motion. I'd seen it during budget crises, contract negotiations, anytime numbers were about to become very, very bad. Margaret had her phone out now, typing with shaking fingers, her face the gray-white of old paper. They understood something Nicholas and Nia didn't. Something about contracts and clauses and the very expensive difference between firing someone privately versus publicly humiliating them in front of witnesses. I set down the presentation clicker with deliberate calm. My grandmother's voice echoed in my head. She'd survived the Depression, raised 6 kids alone after my grandfather died, never let anyone see her buckle. When they expect you to break, she told me once, peeling potatoes with hands that never trembled, that's when you stand straightest. Thank you. The words came out clear, genuine even. Because in that moment I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. 6 years of pretending Taylor's family accepted me. 6 years of Eleanor's backhanded compliments about my appearance while I saved her husband's company. 6 years of being good enough to fix every crisis but never good enough to truly belong. Nicholas's jaw went slack. He'd expected tears, pleading, anger, anything but gratitude. Behind him I saw several executives exchange glances. Someone's pen rolled off the table and hit the floor with a sound like a gunshot in the silence. I began packing with the methodical precision I used for system architectures. Each item lifted, examined, placed in the cardboard box that had materialized from somewhere. The backup drive went in first. Then the project files. The team photo. My coffee mug with the chip on the handle. 1 minute, Nicholas announced, but his voice had lost its edge. Confusion was creeping in, the first crack in his certainty. Through the glass, motion caught my eye. Logan Mitchell was standing at his desk, laptop bag already over his shoulder. He wasn't packing. He was already packed. Ready. Then Priya stood. Then Marcus. One by one, like a slow wave building strength, my entire team rose from their desks. Nicholas turned to see what I was looking at, and his face went from red to white so fast I thought he might faint. Nia's expression shifted from triumph to confusion to something approaching panic. "Time's up," Nicholas said, but it came out as a question. I picked up my box, its weight familiar and strange at once. 6 years reduced to what I could carry in my arms. As I walked toward the door, 2 security guards appeared. Standard protocol for terminations, they mumbled apologetically. Tom and Derek. I'd brought them coffee during late-night lockdowns, knew their kids' names. "I'm sorry about this," Tom whispered. "Don't be," I told him. You're just doing your job. We walked through the cubicle farm toward the elevator, and that's when the symphony began. The squeak of chairs pushing back from desks. The rustle of bags being gathered. The soft thuds of laptops closing. Logan fell into step beside me. Then Priya, her heels clicking a determined rhythm. Marcus, Sarah, the Morrison twins moving in perfect synchronization. By the time we reached the elevator, 22 people had joined our procession. Tom stopped walking. His hand dropped from my elbow. In 15 years, he said, voice thick with something between awe and respect, I've never seen anything like this. Neither had Nicholas Harrington, whose empire had just started its collapse, though he wouldn't understand that for another 48 hours. The elevator doors closed on 22 people and one security guard who looked like he'd just witnessed a miracle or a massacre. He wasn't sure which. Tom pressed the lobby button with a hand that shook slightly. Nobody spoke during the descent. The only sound was the mechanical hum and someone's phone buzzing insistently. Then Logan's. Then Priya's. Like popcorn starting to pop, our phones erupted in a cascade of notifications. When the doors opened to the lobby, we walked out into blazing midday sun. The kind of light that makes everything look overexposed and surreal. Maria at reception stood up so fast her chair rolled backward into the wall. Gerald, the maintenance supervisor, stopped mopping and watched us file past. Someone started a slow clap from the loading dock. I couldn't see who, and then others joined in until the sound echoed off the parking garage walls. This is insane, Priya whispered beside me. This is justice, Logan corrected, shifting his laptop bag. We stood there in the parking lot, 23 people blinking in the harsh light, phones buzzing like angry wasps. The Morrison twins were already on their laptops, sitting on the concrete median, typing furiously. Sarah had her phone pressed to her ear, explaining to someone, probably her partner, why she was suddenly unemployed at 11:47 on a Tuesday morning. I should go, I said to no one in particular. My car keys felt foreign in my hand. We all should, Marcus replied, but nobody moved. We stood there like survivors of a shipwreck, not quite ready to leave the sight of the vessel going down. The drive home took 17 minutes. I know because I watched the clock the entire way, unable to focus on anything else. My phone, tossed in the passenger seat, continued its electronic seizure. 3 times I reached for it at red lights. 3 times I pulled my hand back. Taylor's car was in the driveway. Of course. He worked from home Tuesdays and Thursdays, a luxury Nicholas had granted his son but would never have considered for anyone else, especially not me despite my longer tenure and higher position. I sat in my car for a full minute, engine off, listening to the tick of cooling metal. The house we'd bought 3 years ago, with help from his parents for the down payment, naturally, looked the same as when I'd left this morning. Same cherry tree in the front yard. Same crack in the driveway we kept meaning to fix. Same life except everything had changed. Taylor met me at the door, his laptop still in one hand, confusion written across his face. Behind him I could see his home office setup. Dual monitors glowing with spreadsheets he probably didn't understand. Why are you home? Are you sick? Then he noticed the box in my arms. His face went through a series of expressions like someone cycling through TV channels. Confusion, concern, realization, anger. Dad called. His voice was flat. He says you lost it in the meeting. Says you were unstable, started crying, had to be escorted out by security. I set the box on our entryway table, the one his mother had given us that I'd always thought was too ornate for the space. Is that what he said? He said you've been struggling lately. That Nia had to cover for your mistakes. That he had no choice. I pulled out my phone, ignored the 100 other notifications and found the forwarded email. Nia's email. The one claiming credit for the Henderson account. The one calling me overwhelmed. The one that was clearly part of a longer conversation with Nicholas the first hadn't been privy to. Taylor read it once. Then again. His jaw muscle twitched. The tell he'd inherited from his father that appeared when reality didn't match the narrative he'd been fed. This is. He started then stopped. When did she send this? 3 weeks ago. Accidentally sent to me instead of your father. And you didn't tell me? Would you have believed me? Or would you have said Nia made an honest mistake, that your father would never plot against his own daughter-in-law? The silence stretched between us like a contested border. Taylor set down his laptop, ran both hands through his hair, Another inherited gesture. I need to think, he said, grabbing his keys from the hook by the door. I just need to think. Taylor. But he was already gone, the door closing with a decisive click that sounded like punctuation. I stood in our entryway, still in my work clothes, surrounded by the life we'd built on a foundation that was apparently sand. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something, instinct, exhaustion, morbid curiosity, made me swipe accept. Please don't hang up. Margaret Lawson's voice, barely above a whisper. I'm calling from the bathroom. The executive bathroom on 16, the one nobody uses. Margaret. Your contract. The clause about hostile termination. Nicholas never read it. Legal reviewed it 6 years ago when you were hired, but he just signed where I told him to sign. Her words tumbled out like water breaking through a dam. The humiliation multiplier alone puts your severance at $800,000. But with documented harassment, the public nature of it, 22 witnesses, we're looking at millions. Millions. Why are you telling me this? Pause. The sound of running water. Because in about an hour, Nicholas is going to realize what he's done. And when he does, he's going to blame me. Say I should have warned him. I've worked here 12 years. I've covered for his temper, his affairs, his questionable decisions. But this is going to end my career. Margaret. Can we meet? Tomorrow. Somewhere nobody from Vertex would go. I have documentation. Things you should know. Things that might help us both. The call ended before I could respond. I stood there, phone in hand, when it immediately buzzed again. Dylan from my former team, had sent a screenshot. A Slack channel called The Exodus, with 247 members before IT shut it down. The messages were a flood of disbelief, support, and panic. Did this really happen? 22 people walked out? What do we do now? Is the Henderson project dead? Who's going to maintain the servers? My LinkedIn app showed 47 notifications. Emails poured in. 3 competitors had already reached out with variations of "heard the news" and "let's talk." But one email made me stop breathing. Catherine Walsh, the venture capitalist who'd turned down Nicholas's pitch 6 months ago, telling him his company lacked innovative leadership. Her message was 2 sentences. Your team's loyalty is worth more than Vertex's entire market cap. Let's build something. I was reading it for the 3rd time when the doorbell rang. Eleanor Harrington stood on my porch at 9 p.m., makeup smudged, holding a manila folder like it might bite her. May I come in? Eleanor asked, and for the first time in 6 years she looked fragile. Not the polished society matron who commanded charity boards and country club committees, but a woman carrying weight she could no longer bear alone. I stepped aside. She entered my home, the home she'd helped fund but never truly welcomed me into, and stood awkwardly in the entryway, clutching that manila folder like a confession. Taylor's not here, I said. I know. I waited until I saw him leave. She followed me to the living room, sitting on the edge of our couch as if she might need to flee at any moment. Nicholas fired his own brother this way 20 years ago. Edward. He was CFO, had been with the company since the beginning. She opened the folder, revealing yellowed board meeting minutes, old emails printed on paper that had softened with age. Edward questioned one of Nicholas's decisions publicly. Not even criticized, just questioned. Nicholas gave him 10 minutes to clear out. The family never recovered. Edward's wife left him. His kids won't speak to Nicholas. 20 years and the wound still bleeds at every holiday. Why are you telling me this now? Eleanor's laugh was bitter, nothing like her usual musical society trill. Because I've watched my husband destroy people for decades, telling myself it was business, that successful men had to be ruthless. But watching him do it to you, someone who saved his company while he was playing golf, someone who made my son happy even if we never showed it, I can't pretend anymore. She pulled out another paper. This is from 5 years ago. Michelle Reeves, VP of Marketing. Fired in a board meeting for insubordination. She'd suggested Nicholas's strategy was outdated. Another paper. 3 years ago, James Chin, head of innovation. Terminated publicly because he'd received a job offer from a competitor and Nicholas wanted to make an example. They choose the easy path, Eleanor continued, and now she was looking directly at me. Nicholas and Taylor both. They avoid conflict by creating bigger conflicts. They'd rather destroy relationships than admit fault. I've enabled it for 35 years and I'm sorry. Her hug was unexpected, fierce and brief. She left the folder on my coffee table and disappeared into the night, leaving me with evidence of a pattern I'd been too close to see. My phone rang at 2:07 a.m. I'd finally fallen asleep on the couch, still in my work clothes, the folder's contents spread across the coffee table like a crime scene. Please tell me you're awake. Margaret Lawson's voice was pitched high with hysteria. I am now. Nia destroyed everything. She tried to prove she could handle your systems, wanted to show Nicholas she didn't need the transition period. She was trying to access backup files but deleted the main customer database instead. I sat up, suddenly completely awake. She deleted the entire customer database? That's not the worst part. She tried to recover it herself. Didn't call IT, didn't follow protocol. She ran some recovery software she found online. It corrupted everything. The entire East Coast operation has been dark for 6 hours. They're estimating 14 hours minimum before even partial restoration. The silence stretched while I processed this. Our customer database wasn't just names and addresses. It was 17 years of relationship management, purchase histories, custom configurations, support tickets, the DNA of the company's client relationships. How much? I asked. Conservative estimate? 50 million in immediate losses. That's not counting the clients we'll lose, the lawsuits, the reputation damage. Margaret's voice cracked. She's been in the bathroom crying for 2 hours. Nicholas has been screaming at everyone. He threw a laptop. Actually threw it at the wall. Security is on standby. I felt something I hadn't expected. Nothing. Not satisfaction, not vindication, just a cold, empty nothing. Nia had engineered my humiliation, and now she was drowning in her own incompetence. Margaret, you need to document everything. Every email, every action, every word Nicholas says. Already am. I'm creating my own insurance policy. She paused. Your team could have prevented this. My team wouldn't have caused it in the first place. After Margaret hung up, I sat in the dark, watching the sunrise creep across my living room walls. Somewhere across town, Vertex Solutions was hemorrhaging money and reputation while Nia learned that taking credit and taking responsibility were vastly different things. Taylor came home at 7 a.m. looking like he'd slept in his car. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair stood at odd angles, and he reeked of whiskey and regret. The database is gone, he said without preamble. I heard. Dad's lost his mind. He's threatening to sue Nia, but legal says he can't because he gave her the access. He's calling emergency board meetings. Mom's had 2 panic attacks. He collapsed on the couch beside me, careful not to touch me. He wants me to convince you to sign an NDA and make this go away quietly. Make what go away? His public humiliation of me? The 22 people who walked out? Or the fact that his chosen replacement just cost the company $50 million? Taylor rubbed his face with both hands. All of it. He's offering the $800,000 Margaret mentioned. Full severance, extended benefits, glowing recommendation. All you have to do is sign saying you won't discuss what happened or compete for 2 years. No. The board is threatening his position. If you sue, if this gets worse, he could lose everything. I turned to look at my husband, really look at him. He was a stranger wearing Taylor's face, speaking Taylor's voice, but the man I'd married, who'd promised to stand by me to be my partner, was gone if he'd ever existed at all. He should have thought of that before he gave me 5 minutes to clear my desk. I need you to fix this. Those 5 words hung between us like a blade. Not, I'm sorry. Not, he was wrong. Not, I should have defended you. Just another demand to sacrifice my dignity for the Harrington family comfort. I need you to leave, I said, surprised by how steady my voice was. Taylor looked at me then, and for a moment I saw something, awareness maybe that he'd chosen the wrong side. But Harringtons didn't admit mistakes. They just found someone else to blame. He left without another word, and I knew our marriage had ended in that moment, even if the paperwork would come later. By noon, my living room had transformed into a startup incubator. 22 people with laptops balanced on their knees, sitting on floors, perched on chair arms, crowded around my dining table. Logan's 12-year-old daughter Emma sat in the corner doing homework, occasionally looking up at the chaos with curious eyes. Phoenix Digital, Priya announced, holding up a napkin where she'd sketched a logo, a stylized bird rising from flames. We're not subtle, but neither were they. Marcus was on his laptop, fingers flying. Domain secured. Social media handles locked down. I'm also grabbing variations before Vertex thinks to cybersquat. His husband, James, appeared with a tray of coffee mugs. I made a supply run. Nobody's building a company on empty stomachs. Pizza boxes accumulated like sedimentary layers of ambition. The Morrison twins had somehow created a project management system on my living room wall using sticky notes. Sarah was already reaching out to contacts, her phone voice professional despite sitting cross-legged on my floor. We need incorporation documents, someone said. On it, replied Logan, whose brother-in-law was apparently a corporate attorney. The energy was electric, desperate, hopeful. We weren't just colleagues anymore. We were refugees from a corporate disaster, building something new from the ashes of what Nicholas had destroyed. And in that crowded, chaotic living room, I felt more at home than I had in 6 years at Vertex. My phone buzzed at 4:47 p.m., 3 days after we'd transformed my living room into Phoenix Digital's first headquarters. Robert Hoffman's number appeared on the screen, Nicholas's lawyer calling for the third time today. Ms. West, Mr. Harrington has authorized me to increase the offer to $800,000. His voice carried the exhaustion of a man losing a war he'd thought would be easy. This is the baseline severance per your contract. The baseline assumes normal termination procedures, I replied, watching the Morrison twins carry computer equipment into what would become our actual office, a warehouse we'd found yesterday. Being given 5 minutes to clear my desk in front of 12 witnesses isn't normal. Margaret Lawson can verify that. The silence stretched. Ms. Lawson is no longer authorized to speak on behalf of Vertex Solutions. Of course she wasn't. Nicholas's first instinct was always to shoot the messenger, even when the message was a legal disaster of his own making. Then I suppose we'll let the courts decide what's appropriate. My lawyer will be in touch. I ended the call just as a white Tesla pulled into the warehouse parking lot. Catherine Walsh stepped out, her designer heels clicking against cracked asphalt, surveying our new space with the calculating eye of someone who'd turned dozens startups into billion-dollar companies. The warehouse was nothing special. 20,000 square feet of concrete impossibility, still smelling of industrial cleaner and the ghost of whatever had been manufactured here before. Fluorescent lights flickered intermittently. The loading dock door didn't close properly. There was a suspicious stain on the floor that looked like it had its own ecosystem. This is perfect, Catherine announced, and she wasn't being sarcastic. It's a disaster, Priya countered, gesturing at a ceiling tile that chose that moment to release a small shower of dust. No, it's hungry space. It wants to become something. Catherine walked the perimeter, her footsteps echoing. You know what Amazon's first office was? A garage. Google. A garage. Apple. Also a garage. You've upgraded, you've got walls and everything. She pulled out her phone, made a quick call. Send the contract to my email. Yes, the full amount. She looked at me. 3.5 million seed funding. I want 20% equity and a board seat. Logan nearly dropped his laptop. You haven't even seen our business plan. I've seen 22 people follow their leader out of a stable job into uncertainty. That's worth more than any PowerPoint. He paused at the door. Nicholas Harrington once told me emotional decisions have no place in business. He said it while rejecting my proposal to invest in Vertex because he didn't like my aggressive negotiating style. Funny how his emotional decision to publicly humiliate you just handed me the next unicorn. The next morning she returned with 2 other VCs. They toured our disaster of a warehouse, asked pointed questions about scalability and market penetration, then committed another $2 million on the spot. We hadn't even incorporated yet, and we were valued at $17.5 million. My phone hadn't stopped ringing. But the call that mattered came from Richard Henderson himself, CEO of Henderson Corp. I heard about the situation at Vertex, he said without preamble. I also heard about the database disaster. Nia Blackwood tried to explain to me yesterday why our configurations were lost. She cried. Actually cried on a client call. Mr. Henderson, we've worked with your team for 3 years. You personally saved our product launch. Logan rebuilt our entire architecture over a weekend. Priya identified data patterns that increased our efficiency by 200%. He paused. The contracts follow the talent, not the building. We're moving our business to Phoenix Digital, effective immediately. By end of day, 3 more clients had called. Patterson Industries, Morrison Group, Chin Technologies. Together they represented $30 million in annual contracts. Each one announced their decision on LinkedIn, professional corporate speak that barely disguised their distaste for how Vertex had treated us. Stocks down another 5%, Sarah announced, refreshing her screen. That's 15% total since Tuesday. We were unpacking equipment, setting up desks. Actual desks now, bought secondhand from a startup that had failed, when Taylor appeared in the doorway. He looked smaller somehow, diminished, holding a bouquet of roses. Red roses. After 6 years of marriage, he still didn't know I was allergic to roses, that I preferred wildflowers, that I'd told him this on our 3rd date. Can we talk? He shifted his weight, uncomfortable in his pressed khakis and polo shirt. His father's uniform, adopted without question. I stepped outside with him, leaving my team to continue building our future. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the parking lot's cracked asphalt. Dad's willing to apologize, he said, thrusting the roses at me like a peace offering or maybe a shield. He'll give you an executive position. Corner office. 20% raise. Full restoration of benefits. I didn't take the flowers. He thinks this is about office space? It's a good offer. More than fair considering. Considering what? That he humiliated me? That Nia destroyed the database trying to prove she could do my job? That 22 people walked out because they witnessed something unconscionable? Taylor set the roses on the ground between us and they looked sad there, dying on hot asphalt. He's my father. And I was your wife. Past tense, Taylor. You made that past tense the moment you asked me to swallow humiliation for your family's comfort. His face crumpled slightly, the first genuine emotion I'd seen from him in days. You're giving up on us? On our marriage? Your father didn't break us. You did. When you came home and asked me to fix his mistake instead of standing by me. When you chose the easy path of family loyalty over the hard path of doing what's right. He looked at me then, really looked, and for a moment I saw the man I'd fallen in love with. The one who'd existed before his father's influence calcified around him like armor. But that man had been buried so long resurrection wasn't possible anymore. I should go, he said quietly. Yes. He walked back to his car, the BMW his father had bought him, naturally, and drove away. The roses remained on the asphalt. I left them there. By evening they'd wilted in the heat, petals scattering in the wind like all of Nicholas's carefully laid plans. At midnight my phone buzzed with an encrypted file from Margaret Lawson. The subject line read simply, "My severance package." The audio file was 43 minutes of a Vertex board meeting. The quality was crystal clear. Margaret had probably recorded it on her phone, placed strategically near the center of the table. $50 million. A voice I recognized as board member Jonathan Cross. He cost us $50 million because he couldn't control his temper? The database is completely corrupted. Another voice, probably CFO David Sterling. Nia Blackwood had no authorization to access those systems. Nicholas gave her full administrative access. This was definitely Margaret, her voice carefully neutral. Against my legal advisement. You promoted your girlfriend's roommate? This voice dripped with disgust. Christina's roommate from college? That's who you thought could replace your daughter-in-law who built half our infrastructure. Nicholas's voice, when it came, sounded hollow. Nia showed promise. She was eager, ambitious. She was unqualified. The slam of a hand on the table. This isn't some family drama, Harrington. You turned a personal vendetta into a $50 million disaster. Maybe more if the clients keep leaving. I listened to the board meeting recording one more time, their voices filling my warehouse office at 1 a.m. This isn't leadership, it's a temper tantrum that cost us $50 million. The disgust in their voices was palpable, even through Margaret's phone speaker. The next morning, everything accelerated. We're doing a press conference, Catherine Walsh announced, striding into our warehouse at 7 a.m. with a media consultant and enough coffee for everyone. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. Every tech outlet is begging for a statement. We give them one. I don't want to seem vindictive, I said. You won't. You'll seem like exactly what you are. A leader who refused to accept humiliation as the price of employment. She pulled out her tablet. Meanwhile, Nicholas is holding his own conference at Vertex headquarters at the exact same time. My sources say he's planning to frame this as a strategic restructuring. The thought of Nicholas spinning this disaster into corporate doublespeak should have angered me. Yet I felt oddly calm. Let him try to polish this catastrophe. The truth had a way of showing through no matter how much corporate varnish you applied. We spent the next 24 hours preparing. Logan and Priya helped write my statement. Sarah coordinated logistics. The Morrison twins somehow got us a professional backdrop and lighting that made our warehouse look like a legitimate tech startup instead of abandoned industrial space. At 1:45 p.m. the next day I stood in front of the cameras, wearing the same navy blazer I'd worn that Tuesday, deliberately. My team flanked me, all 22 of them, dressed professionally but not uniformly. We looked like what we were. Individuals who'd chosen to stand together. Good afternoon, I began, my voice steadier than my pulse. 2 weeks ago, Nicholas Harrington gave me 5 minutes to clear my desk after 6 years of building Vertex Solutions' technical infrastructure. Those 5 minutes taught me something valuable. That competence threatens the incompetent, that loyalty means nothing to those who never earned it, and that sometimes the best thing that can happen is being forced to leave a place that never valued you. The cameras clicked like digital rain. Someone from TechCrunch was typing furiously. The Bloomberg reporter was live streaming. Phoenix Digital isn't just a company. It's proof that culture beats strategy, that teams built on respect outperform hierarchies built on fear. We've secured $5.5 million in funding. We've retained clients worth $30 million annually. We've done in 2 weeks what Vertex Solutions claimed would take years, because we have something they lost: trust. Meanwhile, across town, my phone was lighting up with texts from people watching Nicholas's simultaneous conference. Margaret sent a play-by-play. He's sweating through his makeup. Nia's behind him looking at her phone, literally job hunting during the press conference. He just said, strategic restructuring for enhanced agility, and a reporter laughed out loud. Someone shared a screenshot from the financial networks. They were showing both conferences on split screen. Me calm and surrounded by my team. Nicholas, red-faced and stammering, with Nia beside him scrolling through LinkedIn, apparently having given up any pretense of paying attention. The stock ticker ran beneath both feeds. Vertex Solutions, down another 8%. We were still celebrating that evening when my phone rang from a blocked number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me swipe accept. Please don't hang up. Nia's voice, but different. Gone was the sugar-sweet coating, the practiced professionalism. She sounded young, desperate, frightened. I know you hate me. I don't hate you, I said, surprising myself with the truth of it. I nothing you. A sharp intake of breath. Then, I've been terminated. Strategic differences, they called it, but everyone knows it means I destroyed the database. I'm being blacklisted. Nobody will even interview me. She was crying now, ugly sobs that reminded me she was only 26, ambitious and ruthless but still young enough to believe those were the only qualities that mattered. I have student loans, rent, my mom's medical bills. She has MS and I'm her only support, and her voice cracked completely. I know I took credit for your work. I know what I did. But please, just one recommendation. Just something that says I'm not completely incompetent. I looked around our warehouse at my team still working despite the late hour, at the whiteboards covered with actual innovation instead of corporate buzzwords, at the space we'd built on merit instead of manipulation. Nia, I said, and she fell silent except for sniffles. You took credit for the Henderson account. You called me overwhelmed and suggested I needed to be replaced. You smiled while Nicholas gave me 5 minutes to pack 6 years of work. I know You took credit for others' work. Now you need to take credit for your own failure. That's the only recommendation I can give you. The call lasted exactly 5 minutes. I timed it. 3 days later, the news broke everywhere at once. Nicholas Harrington steps down as CEO of Vertex Solutions. The press release was a masterpiece of corporate euphemism. Pursuing new opportunities. Time for fresh leadership. Grateful for his years of service. But everyone knew the truth. The board had given him a choice. Resign with a fraction of his dignity intact or be fired for cause and lose everything. He'd chosen resignation, but it was like choosing which cliff to jump from. The ending was the same. Eleanor called me that evening, her voice hollow but somehow lighter. He's moving to the guest house. 35 years of marriage, and this is what finally broke us. Not his affairs with secretaries. Not his ego that needed its own zip code. But watching him destroy you, someone who'd done nothing but make him successful, purely for sport. That's when I knew the man I married was gone, if he ever existed. Eleanor. Don't apologize. Don't comfort me. This is freedom, even if it comes 30 years too late. The warehouse felt different that night. The Morrison twins had strung up lights that made the concrete walls look almost warm. Sarah had brought in plants that somehow thrived despite the industrial setting. Marcus had set up a sound system that played quiet jazz while we worked. We did it, Priya said, appearing beside me with 2 glasses of champagne, not the cheap stuff anymore. Catherine had sent cases of the real thing. Did what? We won. David beat Goliath. The Empire struck back, but the rebels won anyway. Choose your metaphor. Gerald, the maintenance supervisor from Vertex who joined us the week before, raised his mop in the air like a torch. The same gesture from that Tuesday, but different now. Then it had been solidarity. Now it was victory. To second chances and first-class revenge, he called out, and everyone raised their glasses. But I wasn't thinking about revenge anymore. I was thinking about the contract we just landed, the one Vertex had been courting for 2 years. Global Tech, whose CEO had called personally to say, "We saw the press conferences. We saw how Vertex treats the people who built their success. We choose to work with builders, not destroyers." Our valuation had hit $50 million. Not bad for a company that started in my living room with pizza boxes and panic. It's not revenge, I told Priya, watching my team, my family of choice, working late because they wanted to, not because someone was counting their hours. It's just success. The revenge is just a side effect. But somewhere across town, Nicholas Harrington sat alone in a guest house behind the mansion he could no longer afford, his empire reduced to rubble in less than a month, learning too late that when you give someone 5 minutes to pack their life, sometimes they take everything with them when they go. The champagne had gone flat by morning, but nobody cared. We were still riding the high of our $50 million valuation when Margaret Lawson walked through our warehouse door at 7:23 a.m., carrying a banker's box and wearing an expression I'd never seen on her face before, determination mixed with something darker. "I need 5 minutes of your time," she said, and the irony of that specific number wasn't lost on anyone. She set the box on my desk. A real desk now, bought from a liquidation sale, scarred but solid. "I've been Vertex's legal director for 12 years. I've watched Nicholas destroy careers, break employment laws, cover up harassment claims. I documented everything." She opened the box, revealing folders meticulously labeled by date and violation type. Every illegal termination. Every settlement we paid to keep people quiet. Every time he screamed at someone until they cried, then had me write up paperwork saying they resigned for personal reasons. Logan looked up from his laptop. "Why keep all this?" "Insurance," Margaret said simply. I knew eventually he'd turn on me too. I was right. He's been telling the board I should have prevented your mass exodus, that I failed in my fiduciary duty. He pulled out a thick folder. "This one's my favorite. 3 years of emails where he explicitly told me to ignore legal protocols." She turned to me then, her gray eyes sharp behind designer glasses. "I want to be your chief legal officer. In exchange, I'll ensure Nicholas never works in tech again. My revenge might be colder than yours, but it's been fermenting for 12 years. I know where every body is buried because I helped dig the graves." Priya whistled low. "That's dark." "That's business," Margaret corrected. "He taught me that. Now I'm going to teach him what happens when you create enemies who know your secrets." I looked at this woman who'd sat in that boardroom, watching my humiliation, and realized she hadn't been complicit. She'd been collecting evidence. "Welcome to Phoenix Digital," I said. Margaret's first official act was scheduling the settlement negotiation. "Neutral territory," she insisted. "The Marriott downtown. Conference room 12. It costs $800 an hour, which Nicholas will be paying for." The meeting was set for Thursday at 10 a.m. I arrived early, finding the room exactly as expensive and soulless as expected. Leather chairs that tried too hard, a table polished to mirror brightness, windows overlooking a city Nicholas once thought he owned. He arrived 15 minutes late, a power play that might have worked when he had power to play with. But the man who walked in wasn't the Nicholas Harrington who'd slammed his palm on a boardroom table. This version looked deflated, his Armani suit hanging loose on a frame that had lost weight from stress. His lawyer, Robert Hoffman, looked equally exhausted. "Let's make this quick," Robert said, pulling out documents. "Mr. Harrington is prepared to offer $1.2 million, full benefits continuation for 24 months, and immediate vesting of all stock options." Margaret leaned forward. "Plus a written statement acknowledging that the termination was handled inappropriately, and a non-disparagement clause that goes both ways." Nicholas's jaw clenched, that familiar tell, but he nodded. The man who never apologized, never admitted fault, was about to sign a document acknowledging his failure. The room was silent except for the scratch of pens on paper. Nicholas signed with a hand that trembled slightly, his signature smaller than the bold scrawl I remembered. When he passed the document to me, our eyes met. No words were exchanged, but entire conversations happened in that silence. His eyes said, "You destroyed me." Mine replied, "You destroyed yourself." His said, "I gave you everything." Mine answered, "You gave me 5 minutes." As I endorsed the check, $1.2 million, more money than my parents had seen in their lifetime, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not satisfaction or vindication. Just emptiness. The hollow feeling of winning a war that should never have been fought. Nicholas stood to leave, then paused at the door. For a moment I thought he might speak, might finally say something real. But Harrington men didn't apologize. They just retreated to lick their wounds in private. After he left, Margaret pulled out her phone and showed me something that made my breath catch. Security footage from Vertex, dated the day before Nicholas's resignation. "Tom from security sent this to me," she said. "He thought you should see it." The grainy footage showed Nicholas standing in what had been my office, now completely empty. The timestamp read 9:47 p.m. He was alone, speaking to the empty room, though the security camera didn't capture audio. "He stood there for 20 minutes, Margaret said. Tom could read his lips for part of it. He kept saying, 'I gave her 5 minutes. She took everything.'" "He's wrong," I said quietly. "He took everything from himself. I just refused to go down with his ship." Margaret nodded. "Tom wanted you to know something else. He's the one who made sure the cameras captured everything that Tuesday. Every angle of the boardroom, the walkout, all of it. He said watching you maintain dignity while Nicholas lost his mind was the best thing he'd witnessed in 15 years of security work." My phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor. "Can you meet? Important." I found her at a coffee shop downtown, the kind of place that served $12 lattes to people who thought price equaled quality. She looked different. Younger somehow, though she'd aged years in the past month. "I filed for divorce this morning," she said without preamble. "Served him papers at the country club. During the monthly board meeting. Maximum witnesses, maximum humiliation. Eleanor. Don't pity me. This is 35 years overdue." She stirred her overpriced coffee with deliberate calm. "I excused his cruelty as strength. His affairs as stress relief. His destruction of people's careers as business necessities. But watching him destroy you, someone who'd done nothing but succeed, purely because he could, that was when I understood I'd been enabling a monster." She pulled out her phone, showing me a photo of legal documents. "I'm taking half of everything. The houses, the investments, his precious wine collection that he spent more time with than his family. My lawyer says the prenup won't hold, too many documented infidelities." "What about Taylor?" Eleanor's face darkened. "Taylor chose his side. He could have stood by you. Instead he asked you to absorb humiliation to keep his father comfortable. He's exactly what I raised him to be, a coward who mistakes compliance for loyalty." She stood to leave, then paused. "The Harrington dynasty took 3 generations to build. Nicholas destroyed it in 5 minutes. The very 5 minutes he gave you. There's poetry in that, don't you think?" As she walked away, I realized the Harrington empire hadn't just crumbled, it had imploded entirely. Nicholas lost his company, his reputation, his marriage, his legacy. All because he couldn't resist humiliating someone who'd done nothing but make him successful. The settlement check cleared the next day. $1.2 million sitting in my account, feeling simultaneously like justice and blood money. I stared at the $1.2 million in my account on my banking app, the numbers still feeling surreal. 6 months ago this would have been a fantasy. Now it was just a line item in a much larger story. Seed money for something that had already grown beyond my wildest expectations. The warehouse barely resembled the disaster we'd moved into half a year ago. The flickering fluorescence had been replaced with warm LED panels that Logan insisted were better for productivity and mental health. The suspicious stain was gone, covered by industrial epoxy flooring that Priya picked because it matched our logo colors. We had real furniture now, standing desks, ergonomic chairs, even a kitchen that didn't smell like decades of neglect. Mom, look. Emma, Logan's daughter, called from what we designated as the homework corner. She held up her math test, 98%. Priya helped me with the formulas last week. This had become our rhythm. Emma did homework here after school while Logan worked. The Morrison twins taught her coding basics. Sarah helped with her science projects. We weren't just a company. We'd become the family some of us never had, the support system corporate culture promised but never delivered. $75 million valuation as of this morning, Marcus announced, updating our celebration board. Yes, we had one of those now, covered in wins both big and small. And Richardson Industries just signed. That's 40 employees and 12 major clients. 40 employees. People who'd chosen us not for the stability, we were still a startup after all, but for the culture. They'd seen our press conference, heard about the walkout, knew exactly what we stood for. Every resume came with a note about wanting to work somewhere that valued people over profits. Priya's parents had visited last week from Mumbai, performing a traditional blessing ceremony in our conference room. Her mother had touched my shoulder and said, "You gave my daughter purpose beyond a paycheck. That's worth more than any valuation." I was reviewing contracts when the door opened. Taylor stood there looking like a ghost of the man I'd married. He'd lost weight but not in a healthy way. More like grief had been eating him from the inside. In his hand were papers I recognized immediately. Divorce documents. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. We went to the break room, the nice one with actual chairs and a coffee machine that worked. He sat across from me, the papers between us like a border we were about to formally recognize. "I've been in therapy," he said without preamble. "Twice a week for 4 months. Learning about family dynamics, enmeshment, enabling. Terms I didn't even know existed when we got married." "That's good, Taylor. I should have stood up for you." The words rushed out like they'd been building pressure. "That Tuesday when Dad humiliated you, I should have been in that boardroom defending you. Oh, I should have walked out with you. Instead, I came home and asked you to fix his mess. I chose comfort over courage, familiarity over what was right." He pushed the papers toward me. "I'm not asking for forgiveness or another chance. I know that ship has sailed. I wanted you to know that I understand now. What I lost. What I threw away because I couldn't stand up to my father." "Are you still at Vertex?" I asked. He laughed, but it was hollow. "Nobody's at Vertex. It got absorbed by Stratton Corp last month. They kept the patents and fired everyone else. Dad's reputation made sure nobody would buy it intact." We signed the papers in relative silence, just the scratch of pens and the hum of the coffee machine. In this same room where my team had planned Phoenix Digital's future, I was signing away the past. Taylor stood to leave, then turned back. "I hope you find someone who sees your worth immediately," he said. "Not after it's too late. Not after they've already lost you. Someone who stands up for you on Tuesday, not apologizes for it 6 months later." After he left, I sat there for a moment, feeling the weight of ending a marriage that had probably been over long before Nicholas gave me those 5 minutes. But there was peace in it too. Clean endings made room for better beginnings. Margaret appeared in the doorway. "You okay?" "Yeah. Just closing chapters." I stood, shaking off the melancholy. "What's up?" "Thought you should see this." She showed me her phone. Nicholas's LinkedIn profile, updated that morning. Independent business consultant, working from an address I recognized as a strip mall on the outskirts of town. His latest post was about leadership through adversity and the importance of decisive action. 3 likes. I clicked on them. 2 were clearly bot accounts and 1 was from someone trying to sell him marketing services. "That's sad," I said. "That's consequences," Margaret corrected. "He works alone from a rented office above a tax preparation service." No clients, no prospects, no future in tech. His reputation is so toxic that even desperate startups won't touch him. I thought about the Nicholas who'd stood at the head of his mahogany table, emperor of his domain, counting down my professional execution. Now he had infinite time and nothing to fill it with. No employees to terrorize, no board to impress, no family to come home to. Just an empty office and LinkedIn posts that nobody read. Do you feel bad for him? Margaret asked. No, I said honestly. I feel nothing. He's just a cautionary tale now. A footnote in Phoenix Digital's origin story. That afternoon we held our weekly all-hands meeting. Not in a sterile boardroom with people checking their phones, but in our open workspace with everyone genuinely engaged. The Morrison twins presented their new framework. Sarah outlined the client growth trajectory. Gerald, yes, he was our official chief morale officer now, announced Friday's team lunch. Looking at these 40 people who'd chosen to build something with us, I thought about those 5 minutes. How they'd seemed like an ending but were actually a beginning. Nicholas had given me 5 minutes to pack up my professional life. In return, I'd gained a real family, a company built on respect, and the knowledge that when you refuse to accept humiliation, you often find dignity waiting on the other side. Hey, Priya said, appearing beside me. Catherine Walsh just called. Bloomberg wants to do a feature on us. The company that rose from a 5-minute firing. I smiled. Tell them yes. But make sure they know, we're not the story of a firing. We're the story of what happens when good people refuse to let small people make them smaller. The warehouse hummed with productive energy. Somewhere across town, Nicholas sat in his strip mall office, probably refreshing his LinkedIn to see if anyone had liked his latest post about resilience. The difference between us wasn't that I'd won and he'd lost. It was that I'd learned 5 minutes could build an empire, while he was still trying to understand how 5 minutes had destroyed one. If this story of corporate karma had you rooting for justice, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when 22 employees silently stood up and followed her out, turning a humiliation into a revolution. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more incredible revenge stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. On my birthday, my husband and children handed me divorce papers and eviction notices. The house, the business, the company, everything gone. My daughter sneered, calling me pathetic as they all laughed. I smiled, signed without trembling, and quietly left. Within a week, my phone lit up with 42 desperate calls. Karma had arrived faster than expected. She actually thinks we're throwing her a party tomorrow. Sophia's laugh drifted through the heating vent from Elijah's home office directly below our bedroom. I pressed my ear closer to the metal grate. Dad, are you sure the lawyer said the eviction notice is legal? Nathan's voice now. We've covered everything, Elijah responded. The business transfer, the house deed, the divorce papers. By tomorrow night, your mother won't own anything except that ancient Honda she refuses to sell. I remained frozen on our bedroom floor, my knees grinding into the carpet as my family casually discussed my erasure. Before we continue, I want to thank you for being here. If you believe family betrayal deserves consequences, please consider subscribing. It's free and helps others find these important stories. Now let's see what I discovered. My hand found the edge of our bed frame, gripping it until my knuckles went white. Through the vent, I heard chairs scraping against Elijah's office floor. Papers rustling. Nathan's voice carried up again, clinical and detached, the way he probably sounded in court. The transfer documents are ironclad. I've structured it so she can't claim coercion. As long as she signs willingly, thinking it's something else, we're protected. And Patricia's ready to move in this weekend? Sophia asked. There was an eagerness in her voice that made my stomach turn. Patricia Lawson. The name had been floating around our social circle for months. A recent widow who'd inherited her husband's construction supply business. Patricia understands the timeline, Elijah said. His voice held a warmth I hadn't heard directed at me in over a year. She's already moved some of her things into the storage unit downtown. Once Abigail is out, we can start fresh. I crawled backward from the vent, my movements silent on the thick carpet I'd chosen specifically for its sound-dampening qualities. Ironic that my decorating choice now allowed me to eavesdrop on my own demise. Standing on shaking legs, I moved to our bedroom window and looked out at the backyard where we'd raised our children. The swing set had been gone for years, replaced by Elijah's workshop, but I could still see the ghost of it in the worn patch of grass that never quite recovered. The conversation below continued, but I'd heard enough. My family had been planning this for months while I kept their lives running smoothly. This morning alone, I'd already reviewed 5 contracts for the construction company, confirmed next week's material deliveries, and balanced the accounts that Nathan was supposedly managing. I walked to our closet and pulled down the small suitcase from the top shelf, the one I used for overnight business trips. My hands moved automatically, folding clothes, selecting items that predated my marriage. The pearl necklace my mother had given me for my high school graduation. The watch I'd bought myself with my first paycheck. The photo album from college before Elijah existed in my world. Downstairs, I heard the office door open. Footsteps dispersed through the house. Elijah's heavy tread moved toward the kitchen. Nathan's lighter steps headed to the front door, probably leaving for his apartment downtown, the one I'd co-signed for when his credit wasn't sufficient. Sophia's heels clicked toward the garage, where her BMW sat, the car we'd given her for completing her master's degree. I tucked the suitcase back into the closet and descended the stairs with practiced normalcy. Elijah stood at the kitchen counter, pouring coffee into his favorite mug, the one with the hairline crack that Nathan had given him years ago. He looked up when I entered, and for a moment I saw a flicker of something. Guilt? Anticipation? It passed too quickly to identify. Morning plans? I asked, pulling my own mug from the cabinet. Just some paperwork in the office. He didn't meet my eyes. Tomorrow's a big day. Your birthday. The words sat between us like a loaded gun on the table. 60 years old. I added cream to my coffee, watching it swirl and disappear into the darkness. I suppose that's worth celebrating. We have something special planned. His smile didn't reach his eyes. It hadn't in months, I realized. When had I stopped noticing? The morning stretched ahead with its usual routine, but everything felt different now. I drove to our construction company's warehouse, where Carlos greeted me with his usual worried expression about inventory discrepancies. 3 pallets of premium oak flooring had vanished from our system. 2 shipments of marble had been redirected without authorization. The security cameras had mysteriously malfunctioned on the exact nights these changes occurred. Mrs. B, Carlos said, lowering his voice, something's not right here. These aren't accidents or software glitches. I patted his shoulder, this loyal man who'd worked for us since the beginning. I know, Carlos. Don't worry about it. Just document everything carefully. He nodded, confusion clear on his face. He didn't understand why I wasn't more upset. How could I explain that stolen flooring was the least of my concerns when my entire life was being systematically dismantled by the people I trusted most? The rest of the day passed in a surreal haze. I attended meetings, signed purchase orders, and solved problems as if everything was normal. But underneath, my mind was racing, planning, preparing. Every interaction with Nathan felt like theater. He stopped by the office to discuss the software issues with inventory, his face a mask of professional concern while knowing he'd orchestrated the entire situation. Sophia called to confirm family dinner on Sunday, her voice bright and false. We'll celebrate your birthday properly then, Mom. Just family like you prefer. I agreed, matching her tone, both of us performing our roles in this elaborate deception. That evening, I stood in the kitchen preparing dinner while Elijah worked in his office below. Through the vent, I could hear him on the phone, probably with Patricia, his voice low and intimate. Tomorrow they planned to serve me with papers at what I was supposed to believe was my birthday celebration. Tomorrow they would watch me sign away everything I'd spent 32 years building. But tonight I stood in my kitchen cooking Elijah's favorite meal one last time, my movements calm and precise. They thought I was oblivious, content in my routine, blind to their machinations. Let them think that. Tomorrow would come soon enough, and with it surprises they never anticipated. My phone sat on the counter with 3 numbers already programmed in, waiting for tomorrow's aftermath. Margaret Winters, forensic accountant. James Ashford, corporate attorney. Detective Riley Morrison, who still had questions about my business partner's death 8 years ago. I smiled as I plated the dinner, a genuine smile for the first time all day. They thought tomorrow was their carefully orchestrated finale. They had no idea it was actually just the beginning. Morning arrived with Elijah standing at my bedside, holding a steaming cup of coffee and wearing an expression I hadn't seen since Nathan's high school graduation. His hands trembled slightly as he set the mug on my nightstand, the liquid sloshing dangerously close to the rim. "Happy birthday, sweetheart. Wear your blue dress today, the one from our anniversary dinner last year." His voice carried an odd formality, as if reading from a script he'd memorized poorly. "We have something special planned for you downstairs." The blue dress hung in our closet, tags still attached. I'd bought it for our anniversary, but we'd never made it to dinner. Elijah had claimed a construction emergency that night, though I'd later seen the receipt from a downtown restaurant in his jacket pocket. "Table for two." I slipped into the dress now, its silk fabric cool against my skin, and noticed how Elijah watched me from the doorway, his foot tapping against the hardwood floor in a nervous rhythm I recognized from 32 years of marriage. Walking down our stairs felt different this morning. The usual family photos along the wall seemed to watch my descent with knowing eyes. At the bottom, the living room had been rearranged. Our furniture pushed against the walls, creating an open space in the center where our mahogany coffee table sat like an altar. The morning light streaming through the windows illuminated a thick manila folder placed precisely in the center. Nathan stood by the front door, his stance wide and blocking, dressed in his courtroom suit despite it being Saturday. His phone was out, held at an angle that suggested recording. Sophia positioned herself near the hallway to the garage, her own phone raised, a small smile playing at her lips. They formed a triangle with Elijah at the apex, and I stood in the center, surrounded. "Please sit down, Abigail." Elijah gestured to the chair they'd positioned facing the table. Not my usual spot where I'd sat for thousands of morning coffees, but a kitchen chair brought in specifically for this moment. The wood felt cold through the silk dress. Nathan cleared his throat and stepped forward, his lawyer voice replacing any trace of the son who used to call me for advice during law school. "Mom, we need to discuss some changes to the family structure and business arrangements. What we're presenting today is the result of careful consideration and legal consultation." The folder opened under Elijah's fingers, revealing documents marked with yellow tabs indicating signature lines. "So many tabs. A lifetime of tabs." Nathan continued speaking, his words flowing with practiced precision while I watched Elijah's hands shake as he spread the papers across the table's surface. "The first document is a dissolution of marriage filing. The terms are generous, considering the circumstances." Nathan's eyes never met mine, focused instead on a point just above my head. "You'll receive your personal belongings and the Honda. The second set transfers your interest in the construction business to Dad, recognizing his role as primary operator. The third relinquishes claim to this property, acknowledging that the mortgage and improvements were funded primarily through Dad's efforts." Each word landed with calculated impact, but it was Elijah who delivered the personal blow. "We've grown apart, Abigail. You know we have. This is best for everyone. A chance for new chapters." His memorized speech faltered as he gestured vaguely at the papers. Patricia Lawson has been helping us navigate this transition. She understands business, understands what we need moving forward." Sophia finally spoke, her young voice carrying a cruelty that must have been rehearsed to achieve such perfect delivery. "We've already moved your things to the garage, Mom. The stuff that's actually yours anyway. Most of it was Dad's money that bought everything else." She lowered her phone slightly to look directly at me. "It's all sorted, labeled, ready for you to take." The silence that followed felt alive, breathing in the space between us. Through the front window I caught movement. Mrs. Henderson from across the street stood in her garden, pretending to water plants that didn't need watering. Tom Martinez next door had chosen this moment to check his mailbox for the third time this morning. They knew. The whole neighborhood had been informed or warned or invited to witness my humiliation. "You're pathetic, Mom." Sophia's words cut through the silence with surgical precision. "Did you really think we needed you anymore? Dad built this business. Nathan has the legal expertise. I have my own life, my own career. What exactly do you contribute except going through the motions every day like some kind of robot?" Nathan's chuckle came quick and sharp, a sound I'd never heard from him before. Elijah's laugh followed, nervous and high, the laugh of a man who'd crossed a line and couldn't find his way back. The sound echoed off the walls of the home I'd spent 3 decades creating, maintaining, and filling with what I'd thought was love. Movement from the kitchen caught my attention. Marcus Webb stepped into view, Nathan's law school friend who'd attended dozens of dinners at this very table. He held his briefcase like a shield, his expression professionally neutral. "I'm here as a witness," he announced unnecessarily, "to verify that all signatures are given freely and without coercion." The pen appeared in Elijah's hand, expensive and heavy, the Mont Blanc I'd given him when he'd landed our first major contract. He extended it toward me with the same hand that had held mine through labor pains, through my mother's funeral, through celebrations and failures and ordinary Tuesday mornings that now felt like treasures I'd never properly valued. I took the pen. Its weight felt significant, final. The room held its breath as I pulled the first document toward me. Nathan shifted his position slightly, ensuring his phone captured everything. Sophia zoomed in with hers. Elijah's breathing grew audible in the silence. My signature flowed across the first yellow tab with practiced ease. Then the second. Third. Each name written with the careful penmanship my mother had insisted I perfect, back when signatures meant promises and promises meant something. I signed away the house where my children had taken their first steps. I signed away the business I'd helped build from a single truck and a dream. I signed away 32 years of marriage with the same steady hand that had once signed our wedding certificate. The final signature complete, I set down the pen with a soft click against the mahogany surface. Looking up, I met each of their eyes in turn. Nathan's held triumph mixed with something else. Uncertainty. Sophia's phone lowered slightly as she processed my calm. Elijah stepped backward as if I might explode, might rage, might become the scene they'd apparently prepared for. That I smiled. A real smile, the kind that reached my eyes and transformed my face into something they hadn't seen in years. Peace. It unnerved them more than any scream could have. "Thank you," I said softly, rising from the chair with deliberate grace. "This makes everything so much simpler." My steady composure lasted exactly until I closed the Honda's door behind me. The old car's engine turned over on the third try, just as it had for the past 15 years, and I drove away from my former life with nothing but 2 suitcases and a silence so complete it felt like drowning. The extended stay hotel sat 12 miles from the house, far enough that no one from our social circle would accidentally spot my car in the parking lot. The desk clerk barely glanced up as I counted out cash for a week's stay. Room 237 smelled like industrial disinfectant and broken dreams, but it had a door that locked and a bed that wasn't shared with a man who'd been planning my disposal for 6 months. I dropped the suitcases by the door and pulled out my phone, switching it to airplane mode before removing the SIM card entirely. They'd expect me to call someone, anyone, to rage and cry and beg for explanations. Instead, I would disappear into the silence they'd created. But first, I needed intelligence. During the drive, I'd mentally photographed every document I'd signed, and now I spread my phone across the bed, zooming in on the images I'd managed to capture while pretending to read. Nathan's legal language was precise but arrogant. He'd buried clauses in subsections, assuming I'd sign without reading, just as I apparently did everything else without thinking. One clause particularly stood out. A non-compete agreement preventing me from working in construction within a 500-mile radius. Unenforceable according to state law, but they didn't know I knew that. My notebook filled quickly with columns of information. Assets they knew about versus ones they didn't. The separate business account I'd opened 3 years ago when I'd started noticing discrepancies, now holding $40,000 in legitimate consulting fees from side projects Elijah had deemed too small to bother with. The storage unit across town where I kept my mother's antiques, still in my maiden name. The network of suppliers who dealt with me directly, bypassing the official company channels. At exactly midnight, I walked to the hotel's business center and used their phone to make the first call. Margaret Winters answered on the second ring, her voice alert despite the hour. We'd been roommates at State College, both studying business when women were still oddities in those classrooms. She'd become a forensic accountant specializing in divorce cases, finding hidden assets with the dedication of a bloodhound. "Abigail? This number isn't yours." Her voice sharpened with concern. "I need your expertise, Margaret. Confidentially. Can we meet tomorrow? Where and when?" No questions about why I was calling from an unknown number at midnight, no expressions of surprise. Margaret had handled enough ugly divorces to recognize the sound of a woman in crisis. The second call required more delicate handling. James Ashford had built his law practice on corporate litigation, but 4 years ago, I'd helped his daughter Rebecca escape an abusive marriage by hiding her in our guest house for 3 weeks while James arranged protection orders. He tried to pay me, tried to express gratitude in ways that mattered to men like him, but I'd simply told him that someday I might need a favor. James, it's Abigail Brennan. I'm calling in that favor. His pause lasted 3 seconds. I'll clear my morning schedule. My private office entrance, 7 sharp. The third call made my hands shake slightly. Detective Riley Morrison had investigated my business partner Robert Lawson's death 8 years ago. Heart attack at 52, the coroner had ruled, though Robert had just passed a comprehensive physical the month before. His widow Patricia had inherited his shares in our largest competitor, then sold them 6 months later for triple their value when the company mysteriously received 3 government contracts Robert had been pursuing. Detective Morrison? This is Abigail Brennan. I have information about Robert Lawson that might interest you. That case has been cold for 8 years, Mrs. Brennan. It won't be cold after you hear what I've learned about Patricia Lawson's previous husband. The one who died 5 years before Robert. The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if he'd hung up. Then, can you come to the precinct tomorrow afternoon? Bring everything you have. By dawn, my phone had accumulated 17 missed calls despite being powered off. The hotel's business center computer showed 53 emails in the new account I'd created. Several were from Carlos, my warehouse manager, each one more urgent than the last. I called him from the hotel phone, knowing he'd be at the warehouse by 5:30, just as he had been every morning for 12 years. Mrs. B, thank God. Everything's going crazy here. Mr. B showed up at 4 this morning with that Lawson woman, had me change all the computer passwords, said you were taking a medical leave. His voice dropped. She was measuring the offices, talking about renovations. Carlos, I need you to do exactly what they tell you, but I also need you to document everything. Every change, every visitor, every unusual order or cancellation. Can you do that without being obvious? You gave me a chance when nobody else would, Mrs. B. I don't forget that. The next 2 hours brought a flood of intelligence. 3 major clients had called Carlos directly, confused about emails from Nathan announcing restructuring and price increases. 2 suppliers reported that payment terms had been unilaterally changed from 30 days to 90. The Anderson project foreman mentioned that inferior materials had been delivered that morning, despite the specs clearly stating premium grade. But the most valuable information came from an unexpected source. Nancy Palmer, who ran the coffee shop where Elijah met clients, called the hotel's main line asking for me specifically. Someone had told her I might be staying there. Honey, I don't know what's happening in your world, but that husband of yours has been meeting with Patricia Lawson every Tuesday and Thursday morning for the past 18 months. Always the corner booth, always thought they were being discreet. She paused. My cousin Linda works at the courthouse. Patricia's been there 3 times in the past month filing paperwork. And here's the interesting part, she filed the exact same types of documents before her second husband died. Linda remembers because it seemed strange at the time, getting everything in order months before he had his sudden heart attack. The pieces formed a pattern so clear I wondered how I'd missed it. Elijah hadn't fallen for a younger woman or gotten bored with our marriage. He'd been selected, groomed, and was now being positioned for something far worse than divorce. Patricia Lawson didn't just steal businesses. She eliminated their owners after securing control. I made one final call that morning, this time to Sarah Martinez, who ran the private investigation firm James had recommended for business matters. Her rate was expensive but worthwhile, especially when I mentioned Patricia Lawson's name. That woman's got a reputation, Sarah said carefully. I'll need a retainer, but I can have preliminary background by tomorrow. Fair warning though, if half of what I've heard is true, you're not dealing with a simple divorce situation. You're dealing with someone who plays for keeps permanently. The hotel room had transformed from a refuge into a command center. Documents spread across the bed, laptop open to business accounts they didn't know existed, phone numbers for allies who would help me navigate the disaster my family had unleashed. They thought they'd won, thought I'd crumble into nothing while they celebrated their freedom. They had no idea what they'd actually done. They'd freed me too. Margaret Winters arrived at the hotel room at 7 the next morning carrying 2 laptops and a box of files that made the desk groan when she set them down. Her expression shifted from professional concern to genuine alarm when she saw the documents I'd photographed spread across the bed, each one marked with sticky notes detailing the hidden clauses and implications. 3 years, she said after 90 minutes of analysis, her fingers flying across calculator keys. They've been bleeding the company for 3 years, Abigail. The patterns are clear once you know what to look for. She pulled up spreadsheets on her laptop, the numbers forming a story of systematic theft. Funds diverted through fake vendor payments, legitimate expenses inflated by 30% with the excess routed to accounts in the Cayman Islands, construction materials purchased but never delivered, their costs written off as losses. The total made my stomach turn. $1.2 million methodically stolen while I'd been focused on daily operations. Nathan's digital signature appears on every fraudulent document, Margaret continued, highlighting specific transactions. He used his law firm's credibility to authorize transfers that would never pass a real audit. And here, look at this. She pointed to a series of equipment sales from 6 months ago. Your daughter sold 3 excavators and a crane through a third party. The equipment went for half its market value, and the buyer was a shell company that traced back to an art gallery. Her gallery. The gallery Sophia had opened last year, the one we'd celebrated with champagne and proud parent photos. Every opening, every exhibition funded by stolen equipment from the company her grandfather had started with his bare hands and a single truck. Margaret's most damning discovery came from cross-referencing dates. Patricia Lawson's name appears on signature cards for your business accounts 2 weeks before your birthday. Before the divorce papers were filed. They were so confident you'd signed that they'd already started the transfer process. My phone buzzed with a text from Carlos. Need to talk. In person. Urgent. I met him at a diner 5 miles from the warehouse, choosing a booth where I could watch the door. Carlos arrived looking haggard, sliding into the seat across from me with movements that suggested he'd been looking over his shoulder. Mrs. B, I stayed late last night pretending to do inventory. Around 9, your husband showed up with that Lawson woman. They didn't know I was in the upper storage area. He pulled out his phone, swiping to a voice recording app. I recorded this. The audio was muffled but clear enough. Elijah's voice. Once the divorce is finalized, we can start liquidating assets more aggressively. Then Patricia, her tone cold and businesslike. The timeline is critical. We need her completely removed from any decision-making position. If she tries to interfere, we'll handle it. I've handled obstacles before. There's more, Carlos whispered. I checked the security system this morning. Someone deleted footage from 3 specific nights over the past month. But they didn't know about the backup drive I installed in the ceiling. I have everything. The footage he'd saved on a thumb drive showed Elijah and Patricia photographing inventory lists, client contracts and supplier agreements. In one frame, Patricia was on her phone while pointing at our client database on the computer screen. The timestamp showed 2:47 a.m., 3 weeks before my birthday. They've been planning to gut the company and sell it piece by piece, Carlos said. I heard her mention buyers from Phoenix who'd take the contracts but not the employees. Everyone would be terminated. Detective Morrison's call came as I was driving back to the hotel. Can you meet me at the precinct now? What I found. We need to discuss it immediately. His office hadn't changed in 8 years, still cluttered with case files and coffee cups that looked like science experiments. But his expression was different, sharper, more focused than when he'd investigated Robert's death. Patricia Lawson's first husband died of a heart attack at 48. Her second, Robert, at 52. Both were cremated within 48 hours, which is unusual but not illegal. But here's what we missed the first time. He spread photos across his desk. Both men increased their life insurance policies 6 months before their deaths. Both named Patricia as beneficiary. And both had the same symptoms in their final weeks. Fatigue, shortness of breath, chest pain. Classic signs of digitalis poisoning which mimics heart attack symptoms. He pulled up another document on his computer. Your husband increased his life insurance policy last month. $2 million. Patricia Lawson is listed as secondary beneficiary after you. But once the divorce is finalized, she becomes primary, I finished. My tech specialist recovered deleted text messages from a phone Patricia thought she'd destroyed. She and your husband discussed permanent solutions and timeline adjustments regarding someone they refer to as the obstacle. Given the context, we believe that's you. The room felt smaller suddenly, the implications crushing. This wasn't just about money or business. Patricia had graduated from financial murder to the actual kind, and Elijah was either complicit or next on her list. My phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. It was Michael Anderson, whose housing development represented 40% of our company's current contracts. Abigail, I'm calling you directly because something's not right. Nathan missed our meeting yesterday, then sent junior materials to my site that weren't even close to spec. My foreman had to refuse delivery. The substandard lumber could have caused a catastrophic failure. His voice hardened. I also heard you're no longer with the company. Is that true? It's complicated, Michael. Then uncomplicate it. I hired your company because of your reputation for quality. If you're starting something new, I want in. The contract can be transferred if the terms are met. 2 more clients called within the hour with similar concerns. Nathan's incompetence was destroying relationships I'd spent 20 years building. Sophia's material substitutions had caused a minor collapse at a job site, thankfully with no injuries, but the liability issues were mounting. By evening, I had 3 file boxes of evidence: financial fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, corporate sabotage, and enough documentation to destroy the lives of everyone who'd laughed at my humiliation just 48 hours ago. Margaret had traced the offshore accounts. Morrison had built a case that would trigger federal investigation. Carlos had saved footage that would prove premeditation. Sarah Martinez's preliminary report on Patricia included 2 other suspicious deaths in different states. The woman who'd walked out of her house with nothing but memories had transformed into something else entirely. They'd thought they were disposing of a used-up wife and mother. Instead, they'd created their own worst nightmare. A woman with nothing left to lose and everything to prove. The file boxes sat in my hotel room like loaded weapons waiting to be fired, but I forced myself to wait. Timing would determine whether my evidence destroyed them or merely wounded them enough to retaliate. Each morning brought new reports from Carlos that confirmed what I already knew. Without me, the company was eating itself alive. The Henderson crane broke down again today, Carlos informed me during our Tuesday morning call. Nathan refused to authorize the repair costs, said we'd just use the backup. He doesn't know we sold the backup crane 6 months ago. Sophia handled that transaction herself. The operator had to walk off the Mitchell site. Through the hotel window, I watched rain streak the glass while Carlos detailed the cascade of failures. The automated billing system had crashed because Nathan had forgotten to renew the software license. 3 subcontractors had walked off sites after payments were delayed past 90 days. The liability insurance was set to lapse in a week because Sophia had been using the premium payments to cover her gallery's rent. I documented everything in a leather journal, each failure meticulously recorded with dates, times, and consequences. The methodical note-taking gave me something to focus on besides the hole in my chest where my family used to live. 32 years of marriage reduced to evidence items. 2 children I'd raised became co-conspirators in my elimination. The knock on my door at 3 that afternoon was soft but persistent. Through the peephole, I saw Rebecca Thompson, my mentor from 20 years ago when I'd first entered the construction industry. She stood in the hallway wearing a rain-soaked coat and an expression of determined concern. Abigail, open the door. I know you're in there and we need to talk. Rebecca entered my room without judgment, taking in the evidence boxes and wall of documents with the practiced eye of someone who'd built an empire from worse circumstances. She'd started Thompson Construction with a single truck after her own divorce, turning it into the largest firm in 3 states. Word travels fast in our industry, she said, settling into the uncomfortable hotel chair like it was a throne. Nathan Brennan called me yesterday trying to poach my contracts. The boy actually thought throwing around his father's name would mean something. I told him I only work with professionals who know the difference between rebar and regret. Despite everything, I almost smiled at that. I'm here with an offer, Abigail. Not charity business. I need someone who understands quality control, client relationships, and project management. Someone who can take over our commercial division while I focus on government contracts. She pulled a folder from her briefcase. Full partnership track. Corner office in the Meridian building. And here's the interesting part. It overlooks your old headquarters. You can watch them fail while you rebuild. The salary she quoted was double what I'd ever drawn from my own company. The benefits included things I'd never allowed myself. car allowance, expense account, profit sharing that actually meant something. But it was the project list that made my breath catch. Every client who'd called me about Nathan's incompetence was already inquiring about moving their contracts to Thompson Construction. When would you need an answer? Take your time. A week, maybe 2. Though I should mention the Anderson project is specifically requesting your involvement. Apparently, there was an incident with substandard materials that nearly caused a structural collapse. After Rebecca left, I needed groceries and basic supplies. The hotel's mini-mart prices were astronomical, and I'd been living on vending machine coffee for too long. The supermarket on Riverside Drive was far enough from our usual haunts that I felt safe from unexpected encounters. I was comparing pasta prices when a hand grabbed my upper arm. Elijah stood there, his face haggard, his usually perfect hair unkempt. The confident man who'd orchestrated my removal looked desperate, smaller somehow. Abigail, we need to talk. You don't understand what's happening. Patricia, she's not what I thought. Movement outside caught my eye. Patricia Lawson sat in her Mercedes, engine running, watching us through the store's glass front. The man in her passenger seat was unfamiliar, thick-necked and alert, his eyes tracking our interaction with professional interest. Let go of my arm, Elijah. My voice carried enough volume that nearby shoppers turned to look. Please, just 5 minutes. You're in danger. We're both in danger. She's done this before. I pulled free and walked quickly toward the coffee shop next door, pulling out my phone as I moved. The coffee shop was crowded, full of witnesses, and had a rear exit through the kitchen if needed. Detective Morrison answered immediately. Patricia Lawson is at Riverside Market with an unknown male, possibly armed. Elijah just approached me, seems panicked. Stay in public spaces. I'm sending a unit now. Through the coffee shop window, I watched Elijah exit the store and approach Patricia's car. She rolled down the window, and even from distance, I could see her expression shift from charming to vicious. Elijah stepped back, his hands raised defensively. The unknown man got out of the car, moving toward Elijah with deliberate intimidation. Then police sirens wailed in the distance, and both Patricia and her companion quickly returned to the Mercedes and drove away. Morrison called back an hour later. We missed them, but we ran the plates on her car. She was at the university library this morning, accessing medical journals. Specifically, articles about plant-based toxins that mimic cardiac symptoms. She's escalating. That night, I sat surrounded by 12 manila envelopes, each one labeled with a different destination. The IRS would receive documentation of tax fraud. The state attorney general would get evidence of embezzlement. The construction board would learn about safety violations and substandard materials. Patricia Lawson's insurance companies would discover interesting patterns in her beneficiary history. But the masterpiece was the package for Channel 7's investigative reporter, Dana Chen, who'd been looking for a story about corporate corruption. I included enough evidence to launch an investigation but held back the most damaging revelations. Those would come later, timed perfectly with Elijah's attempt to file mental incompetency claims against me. Each package contained different pieces of the puzzle, ensuring multiple investigations would launch simultaneously. No single agency would have the complete picture, but together they would create an inescapable net. Digital copies were uploaded to cloud storage accounts under different names. Physical copies were secured in a safety deposit box at a bank where nobody knew me. The 12th envelope was different. It contained a single photograph, Patricia and Elijah at the warehouse at 2:47 a.m., and a note, "I know everything. Your move." That envelope would be hand-delivered to Patricia Lawson tomorrow afternoon, right after the others were mailed. Let her wonder how much I knew. Let her panic about which agencies were already investigating. Let her make the kind of mistakes that desperate people always make when they realize their perfect plans are crumbling. The rain had stopped, leaving the parking lot gleaming under streetlights. Somewhere across town, my family was probably sleeping peacefully in beds I'd chosen, in rooms I'd decorated, confident in their victory. Dawn on day 12 arrived with me standing at a postal service counter, watching the clerk process 11 certified mail packages. Each envelope disappeared into the system with a tracking number that I carefully recorded. The 12th package, Patricia's personal warning, would be delivered by courier at exactly 2 p.m., giving the official investigations a 6-hour head start. By the time I arrived at Rebecca Thompson's office for my first unofficial day of work, The machinery of justice had already begun grinding forward. Rebecca had given me temporary workspace on the executive floor, a glass-walled office that overlooked the city's construction district. From my window I could see the building that housed Brennan Construction, the company I had helped build from nothing. At 9:47 a.m., 3 unmarked government vehicles pulled into the parking lot of my former headquarters. Federal agents emerged with boxes and warrant folders, their movements efficient and practiced. Through Rebecca's high-powered telescope, which she kept for market research, I watched employees gathering at windows, their confusion visible even from this distance. My phone, silent for nearly 2 weeks, began its symphony at 10:15 a.m. The first call came from Elijah. I let it go to voicemail, then listened. "Abigail, something's happening. The IRS just froze all our accounts. They're saying something about fraudulent tax filings. This has to be a mistake. Call me immediately." 5 minutes later, another voicemail. "The state attorney general's office is here with a warrant. They're seizing computers. Abigail, whatever you think happened, this isn't the way. Please." Nathan's first message arrived at 10:32 a.m. "Mother, I don't know what you've done, but you're destroying everything grandfather built. We can resolve this privately. As your attorney, as your son, I'm advising you to contact me immediately." By noon the voicemails had evolved. Elijah's voice had progressed from confusion to anger to something approaching panic. "They found the offshore accounts." "How did you know about the offshore accounts?" "Patricia says you must have been spying on us illegally. We'll fight this, Abigail. You won't win." Nathan's legal threats had dissolved into desperate negotiations. "The construction board is threatening to revoke our license. 3 projects just canceled their contracts. Mom, please, let's talk about this rationally. We can work something out." But it was Sophia's message that carried the most striking transformation. Her voice, usually so confident and dismissive, cracked with genuine fear. "Mom, my gallery's been seized. They say it was bought with embezzled funds. I don't understand what's happening. I don't have anywhere to go. The apartment was in the company's name. My cards don't work. Mom, I don't know how to. I've never had to. Please call me." 42 calls in total by 3 p.m. I documented each one, saving the voicemails to multiple devices. Evidence of their panic would be useful if they tried to claim ignorance later. The courier confirmed Patricia's package delivery at 2:03 p.m. By 2:47 p.m., Sarah Martinez's investigator sent me photos that exceeded my wildest expectations. Patricia stood on her penthouse balcony, hurling what appeared to be Elijah's clothes into the afternoon air. Expensive suits floated down like surrender flags while she screamed loud enough for neighboring buildings to hear. "She found the photos in the package," Sarah explained over the phone. "Pictures of Elijah with 2 different women at hotel bars over the past year. He's been playing her while she was playing him. She's destroying everything he left at her place." The investigator's video footage showed Elijah arriving at the building, looking up at the clothing rain, then backing away as Patricia appeared to throw a laptop that exploded on the sidewalk near his feet. The security guard blocked his entry while Patricia could be heard shrieking about being made a fool. "There's more," Sarah continued. She came down to the lobby with scissors, threatening to cut up his car seats. Building security had to restrain her. "Elijah fled to a motel off Highway 9. The same one where you're staying, actually. He's 3 doors down from your room." The irony was almost poetic. The man who had orchestrated my exile was now living in the same cheap motel, probably eating from the same vending machines, definitely experiencing the same crushing realization that everything he thought he controlled had slipped away. Rebecca and I spent the afternoon visiting clients who had expressed concerns about Brennan Construction's stability. The Anderson meeting was particularly satisfying. Michael Anderson himself greeted us in his office, where architectural plans for his development covered every surface. "Abigail, I'm glad you're here. I received a call from Nathan Brennan this morning, threatening legal action if I break our contract." 20 minutes later, the news broke about federal investigations into the company. "I want Thompson Construction to take over immediately, with you personally overseeing the project." We visited 6 clients that day. Every one of them signed transfer agreements moving their contracts to Thompson Construction. The combined value exceeded $8 million. More than Brennan Construction's entire annual revenue from the previous year. Carlos called as we returned to the office. "Mrs. B, it's chaos here. 17 workers have already quit. The rest are updating resumes. Nathan tried to run a safety meeting but didn't know the basic protocols. Someone called OSHA about the violations. They're coming Monday. Carlos, Thompson Construction needs an experienced warehouse manager. Same crew, better pay, actual safety standards. Interested? His relief was audible. When do I start? By evening, Rebecca and I had hired 12 of Brennan Construction's best employees, secured 4 major contracts, and established a transition timeline that would have the Anderson project back on schedule within a week. We celebrated with coffee in her office, watching the last government vehicle leave the Brennan Construction parking lot. You know what the beautiful part is? Rebecca said, studying the building through her telescope. You didn't destroy them. You just removed yourself from the equation and let them reveal who they really were. The fraud, the theft, the incompetence, it was always there. You were just the foundation holding it all together. My phone buzzed with text number 43 from Elijah. Patricia knows about the other women. She's threatening to go to the police about something. I don't know what you've started, but it's destroying everything. I deleted the message without responding. Tomorrow the news would break publicly. Dana Chen's investigative report would air during the evening news. The construction community would learn about the fraud, the safety violations, and the federal investigations. By week's end, Brennan Construction would exist only as a cautionary tale about greed and betrayal. But tonight I sat in my temporary office, looking out at the city I had helped build, one quality structure at a time. Tomorrow I would sign my employment contract with Thompson Construction. Tomorrow I would begin rebuilding my professional life on my own terms. The phone rang once more. Call number 44. This time I recognized the number as the motel's front desk. Elijah was probably trying to reach me through their phone since I wouldn't answer his calls. I let it ring, packed my things, and headed to my room at a different hotel across town. The new hotel room felt safer, 20 miles from Elijah and his desperate attempts to reach me through the motel's front desk. I had just finished organizing my new office supplies when Dana Chen's investigative report began playing on the mounted television. Her serious expression filled the screen as she stood outside Brennan Construction's headquarters, the building looking abandoned despite the middle of the business day. Tonight, we investigate the sudden collapse of one of the region's most trusted construction companies, following federal raids and multiple arrests, Dana announced. Behind her, workers were removing the bronze letters spelling Brennan from the building's facade, each letter dropping into a truck bed with a hollow clang. My phone vibrated with a text from Detective Morrison. Turn to Channel 5 instead. You'll want to see this live. I switched channels to find breaking news coverage. Federal agents were escorting Elijah from the Highway 9 motel in handcuffs, his head down, his expensive suit replaced by the rumpled clothes he'd been wearing for days. The timestamp showed 6:47 p.m., exactly 3 weeks since my birthday ambush. The reporter's voice carried over the footage. Elijah Brennan, founder of Brennan Construction, arrested on charges of tax evasion, fraud, and conspiracy. The scene shifted to Nathan's law firm downtown. Through the glass doors, agents could be seen carrying boxes while Nathan stood frozen at the reception desk, his colleagues backing away as if his legal troubles might be contagious. His arrest happened in full view of the senior partners who had once praised his ruthless efficiency. They led him out through the main entrance, ensuring everyone saw the Golden Boy's public downfall. Sophia's arrest was quieter but no less complete. The gallery she had loved so much was wrapped in yellow tape, the windows she had spent weeks arranging now blocked by federal seizure notices. Agents found her sitting in the back office, surrounded by pieces she could no longer sell from a business that no longer existed. The reporter noted she went quietly, seemingly in shock. Patricia Lawson's arrest provided the evening's dramatic climax. News helicopters circled her penthouse as agents attempted entry. She could be heard screaming about her rights, about conspiracy, about being set up. The footage showed her being dragged out, still in designer heels and a silk robe, her perfectly styled hair finally disheveled. The reporter mentioned additional charges being prepared related to 2 previous husbands' deaths. Morrison called as the coverage continued. Can you come to the station tomorrow morning? There are some things you need to know about what we found. The next morning, Morrison's office felt different. The exhaustion in his eyes had been replaced by grim satisfaction. He spread files across his desk, each one labeled with names I recognized. The text messages we recovered are damning. Patricia and Elijah discussed your removal extensively. The birthday ambush was supposed to destabilize you, make you vulnerable. Patricia had sourced digitalis from a contact in Mexico. The plan was to wait 3 months, then invite you for a reconciliation dinner. My stomach turned, but Morrison continued. Here's the ironic part. Patricia was simultaneously planning Elijah's death for approximately 8 months later. She'd already drafted documents transferring his assets to her name. Your husband thought he was the predator, but he was always her prey. He showed me a message from Patricia to an unknown number. E is easier to manage than expected. Once A is handled, we'll need 6 to 8 months before his heart attack. The construction contracts alone worth 8M. Your walking away disrupted everything, Morrison explained. Without you to blame for the company's collapse, Patricia couldn't position herself as Elijah's savior. When the investigation started, she panicked, moved too fast, made mistakes. Your silence saved your life and probably his too. I returned to Thompson Construction's offices to find my permanent workspace ready. The corner office Rebecca had promised overlooked the entire construction district. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I watched a foreclosure notice being posted on the house I had designed with such hope decades ago. The workers were gentle with it, as if understanding the weight of what they were posting. Throughout the day, former Brennan Construction employees stopped by to thank me for hiring them at Thompson. Carlos had brought his entire warehouse team. The Anderson project foreman had convinced his best crews to make the switch. Even the receptionist, Maria, who'd worked at Brennan for 15 years, now sat at Thompson's front desk. You gave us dignity in this transition, Maria said, tears in her eyes. You could have left us all to sink with them, but you didn't. The mail arrived at 3 p.m. with 3 letters forwarded from the hotel. Nathan's handwriting on the first envelope was shaky, the confident legal script replaced by desperate scrawls. His note was brief. Mom, I need money for the commissary. They're threatening to take my bar license. I know I have no right to ask, but I don't know who else to turn to. The other inmates found out I'm a lawyer. It's not safe here. Sophia's letter ran 3 pages, her artistic handwriting cramped and tear-stained. I never learned anything real, Mom. You tried to teach me, but I thought I was above it all. I thought the money would always be there. I can't even make coffee properly. The halfway house has me washing dishes and I don't even know how to do that right. I'm 26 and I'm starting from zero. Elijah's message came through his public defender, typed on official letterhead. Mrs. Brennan, my client maintains that Patricia Lawson manipulated the entire situation. He states he was coerced into the divorce proceedings and was unaware of the criminal elements involved. He wishes to discuss the possibility of character testimony regarding his years as a law-abiding citizen. I created a new folder in my filing cabinet, labeling it Birthday Gifts in permanent marker. Each letter went inside not out of cruelty but as evidence of consequences. They had given me divorce papers for my 60th birthday. The universe had returned the favor with arrest warrants for theirs. That evening I stood in my new office as the sun set over the city. The Brennan construction sign was completely gone now, leaving only ghost letters on the building's facade where decades of weather had left their mark. Tomorrow, demolition would begin on the interior, stripping it bare for new tenants. Rebecca joined me at the window, handing me a cup of tea. Any regrets? I thought about the question, watching the last light fade from my former life. They taught me something valuable. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying those who hurt you. It's stepping back and letting them destroy themselves while you build something better from their ashes. The local news played on the office television, showing footage of the 4 arrests again. The reporter mentioned that additional charges were being filed daily as more evidence surfaced. The Construction Industry Board had permanently revoked Brennan Construction's license. The IRS had seized all assets pending investigation. Patricia Lawson was being investigated for 2 additional suspicious deaths in other states. Justice had arrived exactly 3 weeks after my birthday, wearing handcuffs and carrying federal warrants. 6 months had transformed everything except the sunrise. I stood at the window of my new apartment, watching the same sun paint the same sky, but everything it illuminated had changed. The coffee in my hand came from a machine I had chosen, brewed exactly how I preferred it without considering anyone else's taste. The mug, a handmade ceramic piece from a local artist, had no history, no memory, no ghost of better times haunting its rim. The apartment itself was smaller than the house, but every square foot belonged entirely to me. The furniture told no stories of compromise. The leather reading chair by the window had caught my eye at an estate sale, and I bought it without asking permission or checking joint accounts. The dining table seated 4 instead of 8, made from reclaimed pine by a craftsman who understood that imperfections could be beautiful. Above it hung photographs from the past 6 months. Carlos and his family at a barbecue, Rebecca and me signing contracts. The Anderson Project's completion ceremony where Michael Anderson had publicly credited me with saving his development. My phone rang with Margaret Winters calling to confirm lunch plans. She had become a regular presence in my new life, our college friendship rekindled by crisis and strengthened by survival. We met weekly now, 2 women who had learned that starting over at 60 was not a consolation prize but an unexpected gift. The partnership ceremony at Thompson Construction was scheduled for that afternoon. Rebecca had insisted on making it formal, inviting clients and industry leaders to witness the transition from employee to equal partner. The documents were already signed. I had learned to read every word now. But Rebecca understood the value of public recognition. The conference room filled with people who had watched my public humiliation and private rebuilding. Michael Anderson arrived early, bringing his wife who pulled me aside to whisper her admiration. 3 other major clients attended, each one having transferred their contracts from Brennan to Thompson specifically because of my involvement. The construction inspector who had flagged Nathan's safety violations shook my hand with genuine respect. Rebecca stood at the podium, her voice carrying across the room with practiced authority. 6 months ago this company gained something invaluable: integrity in human form. Abigail Brennan rebuilt herself and our commercial division simultaneously, securing $8 million in new contracts while maintaining a perfect safety record. Today she becomes my equal partner in Thompson Construction, though she has always been my equal in every way that matters. The applause felt different from any recognition I had received before. This was earned entirely by my own efforts, not reflected glory from a husband's success or children's achievements. The champagne tasted sweeter because I had paid for it myself. That evening a letter arrived at my office. Federal Bureau of Prisons official seal, Elijah's prisoner number in the corner. Inside, a visitation request form with a handwritten note. Please. One conversation before my transfer. There are things you need to know about the children. I held the paper for a long moment, feeling its weight. The man who had orchestrated my disposal was invoking our children to manipulate me one last time. But curiosity won. 3 days later I sat in a federal detention center's visiting room, watching them bring in someone who looked like Elijah aged 10 years. His orange jumpsuit hung loose on a frame that had lost 30 pounds. The confident posture had been replaced by a defensive hunch. When he sat across from me, separated by reinforced glass, his hands shook as he picked up the phone. "You look well," he said, his voice hollow through the receiver. I said nothing, waiting. "They're struggling. Nathan and Sophia. The public defender says Nathan might get 18 months minimum security if he cooperates fully. Sophia's in a halfway house learning job skills." He paused, studying my face for sympathy that wasn't there. "There are children, Abigail. They stopped being my children when they laughed at my pain." His face crumpled slightly. "I need money for the commissary. And a lawyer, a real one. Patricia's team is trying to pin everything on me, making me the mastermind when she was pulling the strings all along. You made your choices, Elijah. Every signature, every lie, every secret meeting with Patricia. Those were all choices. I loved you once," he said desperately. "Doesn't 32 years count for anything?" It counted for everything. That's why the betrayal was so complete. I stood to leave. "Abigail, please." His voice cracked through the phone. "I'm being transferred to federal prison in Arizona. 5 years minimum. I'll die in there." I hung up the phone and walked away, his muffled shouts following me through the reinforced glass. The desperation in his voice was the same tone I had carried in my chest that morning they ambushed me. Now it was his burden to bear. A week later, another unexpected letter arrived. This one from Jennifer, Nathan's ex-wife, whom he had divorced 2 years ago, claiming she lacked ambition. She was struggling, she wrote, trying to restart her life after Nathan had hidden assets during their divorce. She had heard about my new position and wondered if Thompson Construction had any entry-level positions. I hired her as an administrative assistant. She arrived that first morning nervous but determined, grateful for the chance Nathan had never given her. Watching her slowly find her confidence over the following weeks felt like balance being restored to the universe. The news eventually stopped covering the Brennan construction scandal. Elijah got 7 years, Patricia got life without parole after they connected her to 4 murders across 3 states. Nathan received 2 years and permanent disbarment. Sophia got probation and community service, though the halfway house reported she was finally learning basic life skills. I kept their letters in the folder marked birthday gifts, occasionally reading them to remind myself how far I had traveled from that morning of orchestrated cruelty. They had given me divorce papers and eviction notices, thinking they were ending my story. Instead, they had freed me to write a better one. Standing in my office as another day ended, I watched the city lights begin their nightly show. Somewhere in federal prisons across the country, the people who had tried to erase me were learning what erasure really felt like. Those 42 desperate calls had come too late because karma had already been set in motion the moment they chose cruelty over compassion. My phone sat silent on my desk, no longer a source of dread but a tool for the business I was building on my own terms. Tomorrow would bring new contracts, new challenges, new opportunities to prove that the best revenge was not destruction but reconstruction. I had built beauty from their ashes and it was entirely mine. If this story of calculated revenge had you holding your breath, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when Abigail calmly signed every document with a serene smile, knowing she had already set her plan in motion. What was your most satisfying moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more gripping stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.